Hi everybody, I am finally back for episode 2 of Let's Chat, and today we are talking about fat phobia and fitness. I think this is going to end up being essentially a mini series within the series because there's a lot to pick through on that one. But to reintroduce, Let's Chat was created to essentially provide a number of educational videos on life with a therapeutic lens. So essentially that means I do some research and I try to be really nice when I'm talking about whatever topic is there, even if it causes fire in my belly. So today's video is pretty much in direct response to a video that's been floating on the internet now from Jillian Michaels. And in this video, she decides to give her take on intuitive eating. And if you aren't aware of what intuitive eating is, have you even been following me? It's essentially the idea that you should just eat food. Pretty basic, but it got a name because, like every diet that exists in our world, it wouldn't really be what it is if it didn't have a name attached to it, essentially. So, why fat phobia and fitness? Well, if you weren't already aware, I have now gone full-time into fitness. And so this is becoming more prevalent in my life as somebody who kind of stems between being straight size and plus, and most of the time one of the larger people that's in the fitness community. It's something that I've thought about a lot and think about honestly every day, even when it comes down to small things like I can't fit the majority of clothes for my employer because they don't make them for my body size. Like, it's little things like that that really stems to how deeply rooted fat phobia is in fitness. And I guess to give you an idea of what the hell fat phobia is, if you haven't heard that term before, it's essentially the idea that people are afraid, right? That's what a phobia is on its most basic level, of fatness. So whether that's themselves being afraid of being fat in a larger body, plus whichever label you feel the most comfortable using about yourself, or that they have a fear of someone else's fatness. So usually that's tied to people saying they're afraid for someone's health, and so they don't want them to be in a larger body because they automatically assume that that also means that they're unhealthy. So that's like the super basics of it, but maybe we'll continue to talk about that topic in another video. But going to this main topic, like I said, it's in relation to Jillian Michaels' take on intuitive eating. And I have tagged her here. You can go and watch the video if you'd like to, but essentially I'm breaking down the main points that she brought up and where she kind of went wrong. And yeah, let's just dig into it. So, intuitive eating, it's broken down into 10 principles, and these basic principles are like what they want you to take from all of the text and work that they've put together, they being the two registered dietitians, Evelyn and Elise, that wrote this text. It is a scientifically backed, evidence-based, peer-reviewed model to health. And obviously, like I said, they are registered dietitians, so they kind of know what the heck they're talking about. If you're not familiar with Jillian Michaels, she is a celebrity trainer of sorts. According to her website, she holds 4 different personal training certifications throughout the US and Canada, and also holds black belts in a number of different martial arts forms. She herself is not a registered dietitian, and so with this in mind, I think it's important to note that her expertise, if you will, does have boundaries that can the way in which we talk about nutrition and who's allowed to give nutritional advice or therapy does change state to state, even, obviously country to country. But in general, the idea is that if you're not a registered dietitian, you probably should not be giving this advice, because 9 times out of 10, it's not actually individualized care, because you're not a medical doctor or a registered dietitian, and therefore haven't had the proper educational training in order to give nutritional therapy. And if you aren't aware of what a registered dietitian is, they are someone that goes through bachelor's of sorts. A lot of folks will do it in a Bachelor of Science of sorts. They don't have to, but they will. And then they have a master's of science as well. And during that master's of science, they usually have to do a dietetic internship. So that could be in a clinical setting, that could be in a school setting. There's a number of different ways and mix of ways in which people can get through their internship. And then in some states from there, they also have to sit for a board certified state exam in order to officially be a registered dietitian nutritionist. That, again, like I said, can vary place to place, but that's kind of the basics of it. Similar to a doctor, MD, it means they went to a lot of school to learn about a very specific thing, and now they're an expert in it. And Jillian is not, but she gives a ton of advice on food and nutritional therapy. So yeah, to talk about this video, let's talk about the principles and break down what she said. So the first principle of intuitive eating is to reject the diet mentality. And essentially what that means is throw out all the diet books and the magazine articles that have offered you false hope on losing weight quickly, easily, and permanently. And so Jillian's take on this was that it was essentially a holier than thou principle, and that it really isn't fair to blame all of your diet mentality, if you will, on diet culture, which you kind of have to blame your diet mentality on diet culture, because diet culture is why it's there. Like, what is diet culture, right? It's the weight loss industry. The weight loss industry is billions of dollars. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is designed to tell people they need to be smaller, toner, more muscular. And the reality is, if we all said, nope, don't want to do that anymore, it would probably crumble, and then a lot of people lose a lot of money. And money makes the world go round these days. The other piece that I had a personal problem with when she talked about this particular principle was that she said, I'm not saying that people that are in larger bodies don't deserve love and affection, but if you're a size 16, you're not healthy. And for me, I float between a 12 and a 16, depending on, where I'm shopping at. I'm 5'2", I'm over 160 pounds. I am, from a medical term, obese. And so for her to say, if you're a size 16, you're not healthy, that hits me a certain type of way, because I'm also a full-time fitness instructor. I am in the process of getting my licensure to be a therapist, my certification to be a personal trainer. And you just made a blanketed statement about anybody who is in a larger body, and that's just not fair. Being in a larger body does not equate to being unhealthy. While there are a ton, I'm not gonna say there aren't, there are a lot of medical and scientifically based things that say there is a correlation between being in a larger body and X. It is not a causation. Me being in a larger body does not mean I will then end up with diabetes. Me being in a larger body does not mean that I will then end up with hypertension. It means that they often see people who are in larger bodies taking place in behaviors that are causations of those medical conditions. But we completely scribble out that middle part and just create an equal sign when it's not there. So that was just principle number 1. Continuing on. Principle number 2 states to honor your hunger, to keep your body biologically fed with adequate energy and carbohydrates. So her problem with this was that most people eat too much, essentially, right? And that is a really common way of thinking in the fitness and weight loss industry, is that everybody eats too much. And so she stated that you can keep yourself biologically fed on as low as 1,200 calories, but that women typically should not be eating more than 1,600 calories. But what's not right about this idea is that it doesn't take into account anybody's personal life, whether that's their medical history, their genetic makeup, what they're looking to do or what they do on a day-to-day level. A person who lives in somewhere like maybe Idaho, where they're a farmer, they've got a lot of just daily activity going on, what they should, can, however you want to phrase it, do is gonna look a lot different than somebody who sits in a very sedentary sort of job, that drives everywhere, that a part of their daily life isn't to be as active. So for you to blanketly say a woman should not be eating more than 1,600 calories, well, a woman that is on a farm doing manual labor needs more energy, that's what calories are, needs more energy in order to get that job done. So it's not fair to just say 1,600 calories is all you need. The math does not add up. So essentially this whole idea, it puts itself in the sense that we believe that starvation is also a part of the method in which it's important to lose weight. And the whole weight-centric model is probably another video, but like that, for lack of a better word, is trash. So that's that. And then moving on, number 3, the principle is make peace with food, call a truce, stop the food fight, give yourself unconditional permission to eat. She calls this hostile, and compares this idea to giving somebody unconditional regard to drink, an unconditional regard to smoke. And when you look at a behavioral addiction, which eating disorders, binge eating, things of those sorts, that, can fall in the same category in the way that we become addicts to a thing like drugs, alcohol, smoking. But the reality is this: you have to eat food in order to live. You have to. Your body needs it. You do not have to drink to live. You do not have to smoke to live. You do not have to do drugs to live. So you cannot equate the two at all, right? And at some point we'll have a different video that talks about abuse of alcohol and drugs, especially because I had the opportunity to look at different models of the way that we treat those type of addictions while I was at my study abroad. But you cannot equate the way that we treat the two because they're not the same. I have to get you to a point as a therapist. I have to get you to a point where you can have unconditional regard for food so that you can live. I, as a therapist, don't necessarily have to get somebody with an unconditional regard if they're drinking, because they do not have to drink in order to live. It's just not the same. So that's just watering it down. Number 4 is challenge the food police. Scream a loud no to the thoughts in your head that declare you are good for eating minimal calories or bad because you ate a piece of chocolate cake. The food police monitor the unreasonable rules that diet culture has created. So she agreed with this principle, and I guess what I would just add to it is that we do have food police everywhere, right? Like when you go in a grocery store and you're picking up, let's say, cheese, like there's cheese and then there's like the low fat cheese and low carb and low whatever else you can take out of cheese these days. And And the idea behind it is like you're better if you're making the low fat decision, because low fat means you don't want fat. And if you don't want fat, that means you want to be, do you see where I'm going? Like it's just like a cycle of what? Fat phobia. So these are all things to keep in mind as we think about the way in which we speak about food, the thing that we need in order to live. If you're saying I'm eating poorly or I'm eating good, you essentially start to put yourself in negatives and positives, right? If you say, well, I've been eating well because you've maybe been eating things that are more nutritionally dense, you put yourself on a pedestal. And it's probably a pedestal of privilege because you have the access to have fresh fruits and vegetables, let's say. Versus somebody who's been eating bad, they put themselves into a spiral that possibly ends in something like a binge of food because they're like, well, I'm bad, I'm worthless, I'm this. So it has a lot going on. Number 5 is discover the satisfaction factor. The Japanese have the wisdom to keep pleasure as one of their goals of healthy living. Overall, she did agree with this principle as well in saying that food is not just fuel, that you should also enjoy it. But rarely do we enjoy our meals, right? We just like boom, 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 eating, moving on to the next thing. Checking it off our list is like a thing we have to do, especially when you start to think about if you're on a specific diet, like, okay, I can have the X number of this type of carb, X number of this, X number of that. And you're just like checking it off your list versus going like, wow, this onion ring tastes great. Why? Because it's crunchy, because it's salty, because the onion inside has a softness to it. Like we don't sit back and really think about that. Because we're taught that it's just like a part of the weight-centric model. Number 6, feel your fullness. In order to honor your fullness, you need to trust it. You will give yourself the foods that you desire. So she did not like this point, and really watered it down to saying that you kind of can't honor your fullness because you'll most likely overeat. But the real point of this principle is that your body, when we decide to make decisions like I'm only going to eat this or that, and we're doing it in a very strategic to weight loss manner, we're shutting down our own internal cues. We're trying to outsmart our bodies for the goal of thinness, toneness, muscularness. But our bodies are smarter than we think they are. And so eventually when you throw off your internal cues so much, like of course you're gonna end up kind of whacked out. And so this principle is saying take a step back and try to find those cues again. Think about it. When a baby eats, and I'm talking about like teeny tiny little baby, right? They're whether they're formula fed or breastfeeding, they are eating until they're full and then they're done, right? There's maybe milk still in the bottle. There's obviously still milk in the breast, but they're like, I'm done, drop the bottle. I'm done, drop the tit. Like they can honor their fullness. It's the same exact thing, except over time we're taught how to honor our fullness, or we're taught just be full when you're done eating X instead of actually being full. Number 7 is cope with your emotions with kindness. First, recognize that food restriction, both physically and mentally, can in itself trigger loss of control, which can feel like emotional eating. So I think this one struck a chord with her because if you're not familiar with her own journey, she essentially says that she got to a point where she was taking part in a lot of emotional eating and was not feeling great about herself, and that's why she decided to do the work and lose all this weight and ended up on this journey to where she is in her career currently. But what you tell from this is that she has actually done very minimal research about intuitive eating, because she makes this sound like it's something that's very simple to do. And she's like, you have to do years of therapy and work on the trauma. And that's true. Like Never in any of the texts did Evelyn and Elise say that like you could just read this principle and start doing it. You do have to go through a lot of work because we do carry trauma with us on a regular basis. That's what my hopeful practice is one day, is to help people go through that traumatic those traumatic experiences that they have, in the hopes that they can disconnect them from what they're doing in their daily lives, like eating. It's not simple. It's not simple. Number 8 is respect your body. Accept your genetic blueprint. Just as a person with a shoe size of 8 would not expect to be realistically squeezed into a 6, it's futile to have the similar expectation about your body size. So she says she agrees with this principle, but in number 1, again, we talked about the fact that she says somebody who's a size 16 is just flat out unhealthy. So like, I don't really get how she's saying she agrees with this principle, because she's shown already that she honestly does not. But to the point, respecting your body is saying there are a lot of things that we try to change that we should not try to change, and it's a detriment to our health in other ways to try to make those changes. Body size is usually one of those, because we're not always doing, if it's intentional, 9 times out of 10 we're harming another part of ourselves in order to get there, if that makes sense. Principle 9 is movement, feel the difference. Forget militant exercise, just get active and feel the difference. This is a note that like every fitness instructor needs to reread. Like this principle 50 times over and over again, go through it in the workbook, because the majority of fitness instructors, Fitspo people in general, believe that exercise is meant essentially for weight loss. And so they're saying this thing is more effective than that thing is more effective, not taking into account what feels good for a specific person's body. So Jillian herself partially agreed with this, in saying that, you know, she has a bunch of different programs to work for different people, but that you can't ignore the fact that some exercises are more effective, and what's really being meant by that is they can burn more calories in, you know, a specific time block, or burn more fat, or tone, or whatever other aesthetics-based things you're looking at. But the thing is that some bodies are not really meant to do certain exercises. So for instance, myself, because I have joint issues, I can't go to somewhere that does CrossFit 5 times a week, because it's a high impact exercise. Instead, I have to do things that are much more low impact, so that I can keep the little bit of good joint tissue that I have. So although something like a CrossFit may be seen as something that's more effective because it mixes cardio with the strength training, it's not actually effective for me because it's a detriment to my health. So it's just very nuanced and, in all honesty, watered down. And the other thing to think about is that exercise is not meant just for weight loss. The idea that we're supposed to move our bodies is meant so that we can release endorphins. And when you release endorphins, it essentially brings you joy. And that can be a stress reliever. So that's the other piece, is we have to stop saying exercise is just meant for weight loss, because it's not. There's so many other reasons to exercise. It can help you sleep better. It can help essentially make you to remember to drink water, because your body is definitely thirsty. Like, my water bottle lights up and I still am perpetually dehydrated, but when I'm exercising, I definitely drink more water because my body's reminding me that it needs hydration. So little things like that. And then last but not least, we have principle 10, which is honor your health, gentle nutrition. Make food choices that honor your health and taste buds by making you feel good. So essentially, she says she agrees with this principle, but again, misses the point in stating that it completely goes against our, principle 3, and giving yourself the unconditional the unconditional regard to eat. And the reason that principle 10 is gentle nutrition is because you essentially have to do the work of literally all the other 9 principles in order to be able to bring gentle nutrition on the table. If you can't do the work to have unconditional regard for food, for yourself, respect for your body, then you can't really have nutrition, because the ideas that you have beyond it are always gonna kind of unrank. So you have to bring it in as principle 10 because you've done all of the other work beforehand, and then you can think about the science behind food. Okay, so if I'm doing something like being a fitness instructor full time, I'm on my feet for at least 2 to 3 hours a day. I walk to work. So that obviously is using a lot of energy. I need carbohydrates in my meals because carbohydrates give me energy. I need vitamins and minerals to make sure that my body is staying alert and able to be active and getting the sleep that it needs. I need water in order to not be perpetually dehydrated. Yet here I still am perpetually dehydrated. So it's kind of hard to talk about gentle nutrition as principle number 1 when there's so much other work you have to do before you can really get there. Overall, at the end, she talks about who she thought wrote intuitive eating, and she said this person is probably somebody that's had a lot of emotional angst, if you will, with food, maybe had an eating disorder, so she gets it, but it's just not realistic, essentially. And what's crazy is that, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to not use words like crazy anymore. What's ridiculous is that she just had to click on the tab that says meet the authors, and then she could have seen some of the history and work that Evelyn and Elise have done to get them to the point where they are more than qualified to write a text like intuitive eating. And know that Evelyn herself has been an athlete. She qualified for the Olympic trials as a marathon runner. So she understands that there are certain lifestyles that are gonna have nutritional differences in order, again, like we talked about earlier, to keep up with what they're doing. But she made these base judgments, and in that you can tell she just didn't do the research and didn't want to do the research. But to the point of a few of the registered dietitians who have also spoken on this, that I will tag in the caption, why would she want to? Intuitive eating is directly against her empire, essentially. If everybody said, oh my God, I want to follow intuitive eating, the amount of people that are following Jillian Michaels and making her money are going to slowly shrink down. So it's to the best interest of her wallet to say that it isn't actually qualified information, because if she says she agrees with all 10 principles, then she looks like the asshole, if you will, for being fat phobic and body shaming and causing so many psychological issues for every single person that was on The Biggest Loser. So it's not to her benefit to agree with intuitive eating, because she wants to keep the lifestyle she's created for herself. But it is to your own personal benefit to ask yourself questions. When people are saying they disagree with the weight-centric model, do you disagree with those people because you've done the research? Or are you disagreeing with those people because it's too uncomfortable for you? And because you're not willing to look at the evidence that they have come to say why weight-centric education is just not viable for humans long term. So, you know, overall, this video was essentially a rebuttal to Jillian's, and I wanted to get it out now because A, you haven't seen video content from me in a while, but B, because I wanted this to be able to kind of surface around as a rebuttal as her video surfaces around and probably screws up a lot more people in the head that I will probably have to see as a therapist one day. But I encourage you to have conversations in the comments. If you disagree with me, please tell me why. Like, state your evidence, right? We look at things through a therapeutic lens, which means that we're looking at evidence-based, at research, and we're looking at the actual science behind everything, not just completely opinion. So have some discussion in the comments. Of course, we always are here for discourse, but obviously nothing that is hateful will be tolerated. That's because it's my page, not any of yours. And if you have part 2 that you'd be really interested to hear when it comes to fat phobia and fitness, please also leave that below. I would love to do some additional research and talk about other things. But that's this video, and thank you so much for watching.